Hello, everybody, and welcome. Happy International Women's Day. This is our webinar with some great panelists to talk about women and empowering us in the workplace. I'm going to give it a minute for people to come in and join us, but in the meantime, you can put in the chat where you're watching from. I'm based out of Austin, Texas. Thankfully, we are no longer in a snow apocalypse this week. Shay, you're in Miami. Dee had a little bit of technical difficulties with her camera, but she's still on to give us great commentary. And Theresa, we were just reminding me that you are in Nebraska.
Yes.
So just put in the chat where you guys are watching from, and I'm going to give it a minute or two, and then we will get started. If you guys don't know who our panelists are, we've got Shay Rowbottom, one of the top LinkedIn influencers, a marketing expert. Shay Rowbottom Marketing is her own company. We've got Theresa Nordstrom, the CTO of Talent Company Inc., and Dee Puhlmann, who is in the People Advisory Services Department of Ernst & Young. So now that we have some people in, we're going to start just walking through our slides. If you don't know me, I am today's moderator, Vita Sternberg. You can chat me directly on LinkedIn to talk about anything about Humantelligence, and I just introduced our three panelists. Once again, we've got Shay Rowbottom, Dee Puhlmann, and Theresa Nordstrom. And just a quick bit about Humantelligence before we get started. If you are interested in what we do, we are the culture software. You can head over to humantelligence.com to request a demo at any time. You can also check out eqeverywhere.com to see how we infuse emotional intelligence into applications that you use every day, like Google Calendar, LinkedIn, Slack, and Outlook. Emotional intelligence is also going to come into play in this webinar. Later on, I'm going to have a poll asking if men or women have a higher emotional intelligence. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned for when the polls come up. Otherwise, speaking of that, here is our agenda for the day. We're going to be talking about intersectional feminism, our panelists' own personal glass ceilings, talking about their own stories, how they got to where they are, and any struggles they had to overcome. As I said, emotional intelligence and men versus women. And we're going to have some poll questions on trivia and the history of women in business. Speaking of those poll questions, here comes the first one, which is what percentage do you think of the top 500 Fortune companies have women CEOs? A, 0.25%, B, 7.4%, C, 16%, or D, 22.3%. Now, while I watch this poll, I'm going to ask our panelists what you think the answer is. I'm not going to spoil it though, but also why these numbers are so low, because even if it is the largest one, they're still not equal to what the actual gender ratio is. So feel free to jump in on what your thoughts are while I go ahead and launch this poll.
Well, I better not guess.
The poll is open now, so you guys should be able to vote.
Yeah, I would say 7.4 or 16%.
7.4 or 16%. Shay, do you have a guess?
I mean, the 22.3% would probably be my guess. Maybe I'm a little optimistic.
I would say that's a little bit optimistic. When I was guessing, I was hoping for around 10%. I did make the poll, so I know the answer. So whenever we get some votes, I can see them coming in. We've got about 60% voted right now. So once we get higher up, I will go ahead and close it. But I think my initial goal would have been, or my initial thought would have been around 16%. Clearly, it's lower than what the actual structure is. And whenever Dee gets to present her section, I know she's going to show us some insights into the corporate world and existing as a woman in that. So we'll see what she has to say on that topic, which I'm really excited about. All right, I will go ahead and close the poll so that we can see the results. Okay, here are our results. We had a good amount of people guess the right answer, which actually is B, 7.4%. That is correct of the 2020 Fortune 500 list. No one really thought 22.3%, which kind of goes to show that we didn't expect a high number to exist. And a good amount of people thought it was less than 1% at 0.25%, which I think is pretty telling, as we don't have very high expectations to see women in these upper level roles, which is disappointing, but unfortunately the reality, and why we have an International Women's Day and why we need to be empowering women in the workforce. So that was a great poll, you guys. And I am going to go ahead and kick it over to Shay. I've been talking long enough. Shay, you are a top LinkedIn influencer, like I already said. You start your own business, you offer classes on how to succeed on LinkedIn, which will have a discount code in the chat after you get going. And you've had some trials and tribulations. So I'm going to stop talking at this point and let you talk about just you.
Yes, thank you so much, Vita, for putting this together. It's so great to be up here with Theresa and Dee, and just I feel like I'm swimming in a community of successful business women all the time on LinkedIn. That's what's great about this platform. It's really easy to find professionals who are about their business, who are committed to building something for themselves. So I actually have a very, interesting background with my own relationship with being a woman and, what that meant for me. And I think it's a good place to start because it's something that is overlooked a lot of times and people don't realize. But, the way that you're going to relate to your own gender, other genders, feminism, women in business, men in business, and all of these things are going to be not just dependent on the collective and the society you grow up in, but more so the specific family that you were raised in and how you saw your parents treat one another. And so when I first got into business, I had terrible limiting beliefs about what I could accomplish as a woman in business. And I was really dependent on men. I thought I needed male partners. I thought I couldn't do it alone. But there was a part of me deep down that felt resentful because I did think I could do it alone, but I felt like I couldn't. So I was like stuck working with these men, but I was unhappy. But I was like, wait, but I can't do it alone. What's going on here? Eventually, you go in circles enough times, you realize, you need to make a change in your life. It doesn't matter how much money you're making or how successful your business is. I wanted to be happy and I wanted to feel valued and in control. And that wasn't happening in the business I was in, my first ever company. So I started to really dig into my childhood to try to understand why I had these limiting beliefs. Like, why do I feel like I need these male business partners? Why do I feel like women are so disadvantaged? What's the deal here? Like, what am I creating? And what I remembered and what I really started to realize was like, oh, yeah, my dad treated my mom very poorly, just so poorly. And, they're divorced now, but I didn't realize until years later, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense. My dad was a businessman. He had a successful business. He had the typical like sales bro-y personality, like always like dominating man stuff, but not in a healthy way, in a really controlling, narcissistic way, And so he projected his own insecurities onto my mom by constantly belittling her, constantly telling her she couldn't do things. She was stupid. I remember like even just something as simple as driving, like we'd be in the car and if ever my mom was driving instead of my dad, oh my gosh, he would just like give her the business about how terrible her driving was. And it seems so trivial, but those little things add up. And it really did. It created a underlying subconscious belief in me that, okay, I guess as a woman, I'm just stupid. I just don't have as much street smarts or ability to perform or do business as men do, because that was the reality that I grew up in. And remember, it takes two to tango. It wasn't just my dad mistreating my mom. It was my mom allowing the mistreatment and not being able to stand up for herself, not being strong enough to leave and say, no, I want to set a better example for my daughters. And so she did eventually leave him, but it happened when I was 18. So the damage was pretty much already done. I was grown up. So then I was like, wow, okay, this is why I feel like I can't do business alone. And I started to realize that these voices in my head, they were fake. I was just like, this is not real. This has been handed to me. I am smarter than, I mean, I don't claim to be smarter than all men, but I was certainly smarter than the men I was in business with at the time. And I started to believe in myself more. I said, you know what? I'm just going to leave. I'm going to go off on my own. I had started my LinkedIn blog at this time because my first business was actually a Facebook company, but I had already had 30,000 followers on LinkedIn. People were coming to me for LinkedIn marketing help. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to take a risk here. I was scared, but I was ready to let this codependency go. And I was like, I'm just going to start my own business. I'm going to leave these male partners and I'm going to start it on my own. And I was scared. I was like, you know what? Maybe I will fail. Maybe I will find out I'm just like such an idiot. I need men, but I felt there was something deeper going on because I started to remember the relationship that I saw growing up between my parents. And what I found was not only that I could do business by myself, but I started to generate more business by myself. I started to attract better relationships and clients that actually aligned with me because I didn't have these toxic male business partners weighing me down anymore. You know, they were actually dimming my light. They were actually threatened by my light. And I want to be very clear when I say this, that is not the case for all men in business. There's absolutely a fabulous men I work with now who respect me and value me. The problem is I was manifesting actual sexist men because of that energy from my childhood that I was bringing into business. You know, what you fear, you actually attract. So I was so afraid of, oh, people aren't going to value me. I'm a woman. People aren't going to value me. Well, guess what I ended up with? A bunch of male partners who didn't value me. So I left. I went off on my own, started my own company where I today train individuals and businesses on how they can create effective video content on the LinkedIn platform to attract inbound leads and close more deals. And I've been doing that solo coming up on 2 years now, and I'm already to the point where I make more money doing it as an independently female-owned business owner than I ever did having male partners.
I mean, to me, it sounds like a classic case of nature versus nurture, where you might not have gotten the nurture that you needed to start achieving early on in life, but that naturally you're a go-getter and you wanted to succeed. And once you kind of found your way, you obviously became very successful and are now here to spread the wisdom. We also got in the chat that people said it sounds very similar to what they grew up with. So it's a relatable story for a lot of women out there. And I'm glad that we're taking the day to talk about it.
Yes, thank you so much, Vita. And thank you everyone for contributing to the chat. And I actually do just want to make a point to that real quick, Vita, is like, this is also what happens when we open up and get vulnerable, guys. Like, look what I just shared. Those are like really pretty personal details from my past and from my parents. But part of the reason I've grown so comfortable with just putting things like this out there is because what is the most personal is actually the most general. You know, what we tend to think we're alone in and is shameful or we have to hide or it's, you know, too taboo. When we actually get brave and open up, we realize tons of people can relate to it. And there might be people out there just waiting to hear your story. So now they feel like they have permission to share and do the same. So I do think it's changing. I do think women and men are really waking up to this, like, okay, you know, we don't want to raise our kids to have these limitations anymore based on gender. You know, let's change. And so thank you to everyone contributing, saying it was similar to what they grew up with. I do think my parents and their boomers, young boomers, but they're still boomers, you know, I do think that was common for a lot of them. I do think that a lot of women were afraid to stand up and speak their truth. And I'm just really honored and blessed to be part of a generation that's like, no, you know, we're not going to accept this anymore. And now we're shifting that collectively, which is beautiful. So be the example, you know, be the change that you want to see in the world first. And that's what I've done. And that's why a lot more women come to me now for advice.
Yeah, a lot of people are saying they totally agree with you, and thank you for sharing. One more question that I want to get to before we move on to D, talking about things from the corporate aspect, is someone put in the chat that they seem to get more put down by other females. Could it have been conditioned by people who were taught to think a certain way? And I think that goes off of how we want to talk about intersectional feminism, which is supporting all women of all different kinds. And that maybe you were just nurtured incorrectly, and now we're trying to correct that with webinars and thought leadership seminars like this one.
Yes, that is an amazing question. And actually, I myself don't have a corporate background. I went straight from like waitressing right into entrepreneurship. So I've never really worked like a job, like in a corporate setting. But a lot of women on LinkedIn have. A lot of them have corporate backgrounds. And this is something I hear all the time about the corporate workplace, is that there is some nasty, like unhealthy competition going on between women, and women tearing each other down and feeling like, well, there's only going to be one seat at the table for a woman. So like, we gotta, instead of lift each other up, you know, compete for that spot. And I do think that that is very unfortunate. You know, it comes back to this conversation around scarcity versus abundance mindset. You guys, you know, what you believe, you manifest. So if you believe there's only going to be room for one woman, and you have to, you know, compete and dominate and sabotage, you're going to find yourself in a reality where that's true. But if you have a more abundant mindset, instead of being scarce, like there's only room for a few women, you also help create that reality for other women. I know it can be scary, like, oh, but if I support her, will it take away from me and this and that? It's like, no, not at all. You create more of that, and you create more of a safe space for women to feel like they can support one another. You know, I myself grew up with 4 sisters, no brothers, and coming from narcissistic parents who, you know, subconsciously don't really want the kids to get along because it's divide and conquer, right? You don't want a united bunch. There was a ton of unhealthy competition between my sisters and I. So I'm glad you brought that up. That was also a limiting belief of mine for a long time. Like, oh, women just aren't going to support me and they're going to tear me down. I'm going to have to compete. But it was not the reality. It's the reality I grew up in, and I was carrying that energy with me. If you yourself lead by example by lifting other women up, you will suddenly find a vast community of women around you who have an abundance mindset, who will also in turn lift you up.
Right. I can see from the poll results that we just ran that 25% of people thought there was less than 1% of women CEOs in those companies, which could make you think, well, you know, we can't support each other. We got to fight for it. But the 1% of you that voted the 22%, that's the right mindset to have. And with that, thank you, Shay. Stay tuned for more commentary from you. And we're going to move on to D's section now. So Dee Puhlmann works in People Advisory Services for EY at the UK branch. She sent me this really awesome graphic, and I'm going to turn it over to you to just have this time to talk about, you know, what we brainstormed for this webinar.
Hi. I do apologize with the lack of camera, and you all look wonderful. And thank you for having me here. And you know, what an inspiration, Shay. And you know, I relate to your story as well. I grew up with a non-conventional upbringing myself, with a single mom and my stepfather. And you know, I have a 2-world as well. So my background is Southeast Asian. So I was actually born in Thailand, raised in the UK, and I've always been, you know, the kind of 2-world, you know, kind of person. And I think being in an organization like EY, it's never something I actually dreamt of. But knowing that EY is a recognized global company, it actually really, you know, it fascinated me to join them, because I know that I'll be working and, you know, collaborating with all these wonderful people, you know, across the world. And that is a really rare opportunity. And now even better, you know, when we have technology to enable us to do this. So just to give you a brief background, and by the way, Vida, I actually cannot see the slide on here. I mean, I can see just the one, the first cover. That's better, thank you. And so yeah, I'll give you a very, very brief background of what I actually do at EY. So I am in business development and also a product manager within People Advisory Services. What is People Advisory Services? It's human capital, essentially, and it sits under the tax service line. It is, you know, a true kind of traditional business, right? It's accounting, tax, and law. And my part is to manage the sales and activation of our mobility tax technology. So what's the point? So mobility tax technology is designed to help clients move their people around the world, creating better talent solution, enhancing employee experience. So I am a kind of, you know, involved in technology slash tax slash human capital sort of business. And I also work with development teams to manage and oversee the design and build of our, you know, of our mobile application products. So what I do like about EY, as I said, you know, it is a truly global company, right? There's more than 150 sort of coverage worldwide, right? 150 countries. You know, how many of us? 300,000. So that's the size of Iceland. And you know, and it keeps growing, and I love that sort of, you know, diversity and you know, the number of people. It's an entire population workforce, and I've added on there. So this is based on the UK and Ireland data, that the partnerships, which is the highest level, of seniority within the firm. So that, you know, it falls probably under the exec layer. So 90% are, you know, Caucasian, and, you know, a lot of that, 80%, as you can see, male. And it is something that we take, I think, very seriously, yeah, as a firm. And, you know, with that, and I added the graphic below there, it's, you know, what we're trying to address, all these issues here, we're trying to address it through the EY Diversity and Inclusion Network. So we have this, you know, kind of initiatives going on, right, where we're trying to encourage female talent and, you know, people of color and, you know, anyone who's underrepresented under leadership programs through, you know, promoting activities for the networks that you see there. So you have the, you know, LGBT plus EY Women's Network, which I did some work for previously, the Race and Ethnicity Family Network, you know, Disabled Network. So it goes on, right? So there's a whole concept of, you know, belonging. So just to go back to the kind of, you know, the whole population that we have. So I think this is a kind of a company that has aspirations, right, to become a model firm where, you know, we try our very best to, you know, develop this sort of inclusion within a workplace. And obviously, you know, it's an ongoing effort. And like today, for example, I've dialed into, you know, loads of kind of, you know, talks and forums and, you know, award ceremonies that we do celebrate, you know, through the DNI network. And I, you know, in my 7th year at EY now, have seen, you know, a lot of like the strength of the network, especially women's network, grow, you know, from year to year. It's, you know, gaining a lot of momentum, because I think, you know, and I believe, I am for one too sick and tired of, you know, women being underrepresented, you know, people of minority, ethnic minority groups, you know, are not, you know, part of leadership programs. And I think we're in a strong position to do that, you know, as a firm, through these activities, through these, you know, networks, through these campaigns. More recently, I've actually joined the EY Far East Network, and I supported them with the communications effort, because I felt, you know, with this COVID pandemic, I think the Southeast Asian was so badly affected in terms of their communities, the kind of stereotype they had. So, you know, these awful racial abuse. So I felt the need to kind of, you know, support and make sure that the network, you know, get the voice, get the visibility, and you know, have a part in this sort of, you know, sort of hype of crisis, right, that we're in. And just to kind of touch on sort of, you know, my accomplishment a little bit. So along this startup mindset, I actually, before EY, I was actually a graphic designer. So I'm not an auditor, a tax advisor, so none of that. And I worked for various startups, design and advertising agencies. I've worked for, you know, family-run companies who does e-learning, corporate training. I took on freelance work, you know, and I thought, you know, I'm kind of missing the whole network aspect, because when you freelance, you know, it's hard to kind of connect with people unless you really spend, you know, like day on day doing that. And I'm awful at networking. So I thought, I want to be back in full time. I want to be in the job world, you know, I want to join the rest of the crew. And so before I actually accepted the job at EY, I had 3 other job offers. However, I took EY, as I said, because, you know, I felt I needed something a little bit more of an international kind of coverage, and this sort of enrich, you know, nationalities. I wanted to be in the kind of mixed teams. And I joined EY as a creative design manager, and working in pursuits and, you know, helping marketing teams and pursuit teams, you know, go to market and, you know, sending that messages and winning accounts. And then what I did was, I continually network within the firm and, talk to our senior leaders about what can I do to help them with my, design and creativity skills. And, how can I move into more technology support, because that was where the business was going. So, I use my creativity and design knowledge and turn that into a business, answer. Right. So I think I really pitch myself into people advisory services, and I've been doing that back and forth, and here I am. I'm still here, and my role, I think I can be happy about it. It has, if you look back, in terms of how I was as a designer coming into this, corporation, and then, flipping my career around to do business development, to think about sort of a tax account, and how do we look at talent management. So this is kind of like a big career path change for me. And to get up there, I think it's going to be a forever challenge. And your topic here, intersectional feminism, I think I experienced all those things. I think I'm one for one in an organization like this. I am typically not in the right sort of background. I didn't start as an associate working my way up. I'm completely coming in as an outsider, and I have to prove myself differently. I have to always differentiate myself. So it is a constant, glass ceiling, and I'm not gonna ever, I think, maybe one day I would, shatter through that. I think it will be, a continual process of, look, this is what I can do. Look, how about this? But I don't mind doing that. I think because, I think I'm used to sort of continually show myself, show my work, and I'm okay with that. However, I think, people within the firm, I think a lot of them, I think they are kind of at the moment going through a lot of change. If you talk about corporate culture, there's a lot of change that still needs to happen. And it's been around for like, what, 3-4 decades, right? How men are trusted to run companies. And I think we haven't had that female culture, and we haven't had, that space for female to become CEO, to go back to your stats earlier, it's hard to get up and it's hard to stay up. And I think that has to change. And I think until leadership, start putting people into those roles and give them the training they need, then we'll have a greater female population that are leaders, that can, change, and make it more systemic. And I think that's what we need. So yeah, so that's just a little background and how I would describe my startup mindset, being portrayed in a company like this.
I love what you said, and specifically how you said that you feel like you have to prove yourself for being a woman of color in the corporate world, but you use that as kind of a motivator. You said you don't mind it so much because you can prove yourself and you're doing amazing work. And even if you can't overcome it long term, it's not going to stop you from trying your best and succeeding. And kudos to your volunteer work. I think you're a huge inspiration. One other thing I did want to mention is when you mentioned diversity in the corporate world, I think what we're seeing from things like Women's History Month, last month being Black History Month, when we have Pride come around, is that these celebrations are turning into real movements that are hopefully affecting change all over, specifically in the corporate world. Hopefully you see it slowly starting to change, and hopefully we all do see it start to change and really affect culture.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
So with that, thank you, Dee, for giving that rundown and kind of your background. Our next panelist is Theresa Nordstrom. She's going to be talking about how she got to where she is, some of her investment choices, and something I'd never heard of before I spoke to her was Peacock versus the Penguin. I thought it was really cool. She actually sent me a little YouTube video about it. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Theresa. Thank you for being here, and I'm excited to hear what you have to present. Real quickly,
Awesome.
though, for the people who had to drop off at the 30-minute mark coming up, this will be recorded and sent out to everybody afterwards. So if you can't stay for the rest of it, it will be sent to you to rewatch. It'll also be available on our YouTube. So with that being said, go ahead and have your time to present.
Thus the peacocks in the back. Yes, you have to look at the peacock versus the penguins, and I am a peacock in the land of penguins. I'm always full of color. So anyways, there is a story behind it, and actually has a very good diversity story. So so my background, I'm a 20+ year corporate HR veteran, corporate HR and talent acquisition professional. I own my own company now, but actually I have to say, prepping for this, it was very kind of eye-opening and reflective, I have to admit. So throughout my years, I always thought, it was I always conformed, or I was a culture add to many companies. And I always thought it was just kind of my peacock personality. So when I go into a company or kind of anywhere, I'm kind of like this colorful, vibrant, maybe kind of loud and boisterous person, right? And I'm just like, well, I'm just different. And what's interesting is I now, as I reflect, and actually there's some studies behind this, those personality traits are just, I'm not saying I don't have, I won't use this as a total excuse as feminine traits, but they actually are a lot of feminine traits. And actually, there are studies around this. And I'm just, this will kind of set the stage for this. One study found that 66% of women's reviews contain comments about their personalities, but only 1% of men's reviews did. These double standards can have a real impact on equity outcomes. And I actually, a lot of my evaluations in the past have had comments about my strong personality. It doesn't make me unprofessional, and everyone likes me. I mean, I actually have these comments, and I've actually posted about it on LinkedIn. But by the way, I don't say that it's me. I say that it's someone else, because I don't want anyone to think it's me. But one of the things that over the years is that I worked at these corporate companies, everything from Fortune 100. I helped Best Buy go international. I was I've had a lot of firsts. So I've first international HR leader for Best Buy back in the day. I've been I have been the first female shareholder at a 50+-year-old construction company. So I've actually been able to, I guess, hit the ceiling at a lot of different companies, of small companies and large companies. But I've done it in a way where I either had to do it in a way where I always felt like I was conforming or flourishing, or I was a culture add. And anyone that's in HR, or maybe you've heard this, where there's culture fit and there's a culture add. And I think that one of the things as I think about this is that are companies allowing people to think about, one, you don't have to just conform. And throughout my years, whether I was at a large company or small company, I probably, as I was, a small company, a large company, I was probably forcing myself to conform in some companies. And I think that I really saw that impact my engagement. I saw that I had to work harder. I saw that it impact my mental health, and I saw that impact my results. And I think that now there's so many, great things that companies are doing. And I think that can really just help companies and individuals. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I saw that was happening. And actually, Vida, I think with not to give human intelligence a plug, but one of the things is like, for example, I was at a company, and I support in HR. I supported, I'll just say I supported the Treasury Department, and they would say, "Hey, Theresa, we need you to be here for this leadership meeting because we don't have anyone." That's an I was on the disc, we didn't have anyone that was here because we don't have an we don't have an influencer. But what's interesting is that other companies, they might see that high vibrant, that high social person as a risk to them, right? And so I think that thinking about in some companies where those personality traits might be a risk to them, or they might see that high boisterous person as maybe someone that's like totally outside of the box. I always felt like I was conforming at some companies. And so, I as I think about it too, there was even examples where I was at one company in an afternoon where I just always think there's kind of cool examples. I mean, now I look back, there's examples where at one of the companies it was a Friday afternoon, and I have this personality trait of mine. I was like a glass. You think about an office door where it's like glass, and we were in a meeting, and I was like, hey, I was like waving at someone. I literally had one of the senior executives call and complain about me because I was like waving at these certain people. But yet on my evaluations, I had people praise me for my energy level. And so I share that example because it's really interesting how that same energy that I bring to the table, and I'll read this example on my evaluation, can be construed as negative. And one of the things, I don't know if anyone's heard, I'd be interested if anyone's heard of these examples, but there's been studies anywhere in the last 10 years where there's this one study where 289 evaluations, 88% of the women received delta feedback on their personality, where 59% of men didn't. And interesting enough, did you know a lot of that feedback actually came from women? And actually, so I'm gonna give you this, and I'll let you guys we can kind of talk about these things. So this is feedback that I received on evaluation. I think that one of the things that I am really kind of working with some of my clients on is that the feedback, we do need to be careful that we make assumptions that it could just come from men. So this was an example of feedback I got. I'll just say, Theresa brings great energy and enthusiasm to the company. She relates easily to people and everyone enjoys being around her. This is a wonderful strength to have, but I would encourage her not to let this seem unprofessional. I don't think she's unprofessional, but I think her behaviors can occasionally give the impression that she is unprofessional. Loud, boisterous laughter, or attire that is sometimes too casual. I wear a lot of sports. I'm a big sports person. I'm Lululemon. You are a tremendous asset to the team, and we would be missing a key component to the leadership team if you were not part of the team. So that was on one of my appraisals, guys. So I share that. Here's one of the things I challenge everyone to do. Go back and look at any evaluation you've ever given, whether you're female or male, because I actually would like to do this. I don't have any evaluations because I don't do them anymore. But I wonder if we all have given feedback on someone's personalities. Harvard Business Review has done some research on that honestly, are we doing ourselves justice, females, to be quite honest with you? So yeah, so my I guess my big thing that I kind of got out of this is, one, am I conforming, or am I being added? Am I being a culture ad? And two, being careful with the personality being construed as a negative. So, but yeah, that's a little bit of my history. So
Absolutely. I think that being personable and very likable is considered a feminine trait, but it actually might relate a lot to emotional intelligence. So it'll be interesting to see how we talk about that and what the poll says when we ask that in a couple of slides. But thank you for sharing. We actually have a question come in that says, I relate to every single trait that you're talking about. Having a very colorful, high energy personality can make people feel a little bit threatened. And then we also had somebody talk about how an influencer, because you mentioned the eye and disc, is who's pulling corporate culture forward, is the real asset. And since you mentioned Humantelligence and we're hosting this webinar today, what Humantelligence does is really analyze culture and give people 3 different business personas to help you organize meetings exactly in the way that you were talking about. So thank you so much, Theresa, for talking about all of that. I have 2 more poll questions for us
Cool.
to ask, and then we'll talk more about it in the question sections when we get there.
Awesome.
So this next poll is, what is the current wage gap? It's just kind of to talk about women's history. One, there is no wage gap. 70 cents to the dollar, 80 cents to the dollar, or 90 cents to the dollar. What do you guys think it is? I'll take your guesses from the panelists while I launch this poll.
I would say
70.
80.
I say
70, 80. Is anybody going to guess 90? We'll see. I just opened the poll, so go ahead and vote if you think you know what the current wage gap is. It is based out of America, so I'm not exactly sure what the UK would be based on, but this is just to see what people think it is for America. I'm watching the poll results come in. It's coming in between 70 and 80 seem to be the major guesses. I thought when I was doing this research that it was in the high 70s, so the answer may or may not surprise you guys. I'll just leave the poll open for another minute or so. The next poll question is going to be about emotional intelligence, so stay tuned for that one. Just going to give it up to the minute, so about 10 more seconds to get your answers in. Interested to see the results? So let's close this and share them with everybody. So I'm very interested. Someone mentioned that there is no wage gap, just 3% of people. We got a tie between 70 cents to the dollar and 80 cents to the dollar, which is very interesting. And some people thought it was all the way at 90. Just so you guys know, the correct answer is around 80 cents to the dollar. It's actually 81.6. So just over 80%. We're getting there, because a couple years ago it was not that high. But call me crazy, I feel like people who do the same job should be paid the same amount.
So is this an overall average for like all professions?
Yes, for America.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
all of it. Okay. Yeah.
And then our next and last trivia question is, do you think that women or men have a higher emotional intelligence? So let me go ahead and launch this poll. It's actually funny, when I was making this, I put in nature versus nurture as a answer choice, and we ended up talking about that, Shay, during your presentation section. And just in case you were wondering if you're trying to make a human intelligence profile, we do have a gender non-conforming option. But for the purposes of this question, I just left it as male versus female so we can discuss that. So I'm going to go ahead and let this poll run for a while. Wow, it's so interesting watching the poll results come in. I think you guys will be excited by the answer, and it'll spark some good discussion. Well, I actually want to go down the panel and talk and hear from each of you on this, because when we met before this webinar, we were talking about feminine traits, masculine traits, if men can have feminine traits, if women can have masculine traits, and how are those tied to emotional intelligence. So why don't we go through in the same order that we presented. So I'll hear from you, Shay, and then Dee, and then Theresa, because I want to get everybody's opinion on this, maybe just like a minute or two from each of you. So let me close this poll and share the results, and then we will hear from you, Shay. So 72% of people voted women, 18% nature versus nurture, and not a single person voted that men would have a higher emotional intelligence. So if you're a man watching this and feel like your emotional intelligence might be lacking, you can always check out eqeverywhere.com, because maybe you need some assets to help you deal with the disadvantage.
So we don't have any men on the call then?
I don't know, maybe we just have some very self-reflective men who know what they're talking about. But let's hear from you first, Shay. What are your thoughts on this and these results?
That's funny.
Yeah, I am a big believer that there are innate differences, between the genders. I think women are more emotionally intelligent. Women tend to have better intuition. That's why you see a lot of, for those of you who've dabbled in the healing or spiritual community, for example, like I have a lot of like psychics or like mediums, or not all of them. I've seen men, but a lot of them are women. Why is that? We do need to look at that. And I think, as woo-woo as this may sound, the men were built more like biologically, were built more physically strong for the purpose of, you know, hunting and going out in the nature and killing and bringing home the meat for the family, whereas the woman was designed to be more like mentally strong. That's why you hear these like stereotypes about like man flu, or like when guys get sick they're such weenies, whereas like women are like, come on, you know, because women had to be more emotionally sharp, whereas men more physically. So I actually believe the reason that women tend to be more emotionally intelligent, more more able to do things like predict the future, be psychic, tap into their intuition, read people's energies, is actually just biologically comes down to the fact that we have babies. You know, like which gender is going to be more closely connected to God and source consciousness than the gender that actually can like produce life within their makeup. So I think it's really cool that people are starting to have these conversations and look at it. I always say in regards to like the wage gap, I've talked about this a lot on my LinkedIn too, you know, it also comes down to, are we valuing feminine traits and feminine qualities the same in business as we are the masculine? And the answer for a long time has been no. You know, men and women are innately different. The problem is we valued those differences in men. And these are generalizations. You know, there are some women who tend to be more masculine and vice versa. But in general, the more masculine qualities are things that we've valued a lot more in society. Oh, you know, work hard, you know, like just very more like the doing, the executing, the, you know, you gotta grind all the time to build a business, this and that. Whereas a lot of feminine qualities like creativity, wanting to cooperate, wanting to teach people how to all get along, wanting to be harmonious, that's been kind of like written off as like, yeah, but that at the end of the day doesn't increase profits. So then of course the business world went, shoop, we're just gonna value masculine qualities way more. The problem is that created a society where a bunch of women felt like, okay, well, in order to compete with men in business and potentially make the same money, you know, I'm going to have to shut down my natural feminine qualities to, you know, step more into my masculine. And I actually think that hurts both men and women. And I'm not talking about, you know, oh, no women should do business because business is masculine. That's not what I'm saying. You know, we fought hard for our ability to be able to start a business and work in the way that men do. And if you as a woman innately want that, go for it. The problem is there are still women who innately want things like, I want to stay at home and raise kids. You know, I want to have a husband who takes care of the bills so that I can raise my family. And I think we need to understand that like that's beautiful too, and value that the same, as opposed to looking at it like, oh, well, he makes all the money, he has more value in society because he's doing this. And then the greatest value you can have in society is raising future generations and shaping the well-being of the people to come after us. So those are my thoughts. You know, I do think that men and women have differences. I think it's just now we're starting to catch up in the professional world to realize like, oh, you know, maybe these feminine qualities that we've kind of deemed like woo-woo in business and not as important are actually really important, because only focusing on and valuing the masculine has just driven us into a world of complete business narcissism, where there's like not enough empathy in business. And empathy does tend to be, in general, you know, more of a feminine trait.
Yeah, I totally agree with all of that. It's interesting that you mentioned the physical aspect, because we actually had a question asking if we thought in the future that women would have more official roles and men would have more physical jobs. So it's interesting you brought that up. But for time's sake, I'm going to move on to Dee and get your 2 cents, and then we'll wrap up with Theresa. So Dee, what do you think of these results?
This is a tricky one, because, you know, we were talking about somebody who can actually put themselves in other people's place, who has that, you know, emotional depth within themselves, and appreciate the differences and uniqueness of others, right? So I think that can also be nurtured. You know, you can raise a child and in a very open-minded way, expose them to different cultures and influences. but I kind of, yeah, I'm agreeing with Shay a little bit on that. Yes, women, you know, they have more exposure to this threshold of pain and suffering and inequalities, and, you know, having to, you know, multitask all throughout their lives, and, you know, living up to being this support, you know, figure. And it's a continual, you know, stereotype, right? So I think as we go on, and I think as we, you know, close this gender gap, you know, in workplace, I really, you know, staying positive and hoping to see that the emotional intelligence and, you know, the kind of empathy aspect, right, of human emotional intelligence could be a bit more equal, right? So there isn't that kind of, you know, women have to endure all these emotional baggage, you know, we're not the one who always nags, or, you know, all of these things. I think these are just labels. And yeah, I think it's still, to me, a tricky one. And I believe that you can, you know, nurture someone to have, you know, better, higher emotional intelligence.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Dee. And Theresa, let's wrap things up with your thoughts on these poll results. And then we'll have our closing slide. So what do you think of nobody picking men for being higher in emotional intelligence? I think you might be muted.
So I do think they have more intuition. I think women have more intuition around it. I believe with tools that they can learn and be taught to be better at understanding individuals. So because that is one big thing I think these days is with, you know, whether it's human intelligent disc or whatever, they can learn to be better at it. And we have a lot of resources and tools, but I think we're naturally better with the intuition piece. And Shay had a lot of great stuff to say around it, but they can become better. So no excuses. Oh, now I'm still muted, whatever.
No,
No?
you weren't
Okay.
muted. We can hear
Like, okay, whatever.
Not at all.
So anyways, but I do think there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of tools and resources to understand people as individuals and to be able to communicate better. And I think communicating and having effective and open dialogue is a big basis for a lot of our challenges these days. It won't solve everything, but it is a big basis for a lot of our issues. So
yeah, it's one of the reasons that I love our EQEverywhere.com, because it just helps you with emotional intelligence, and it plugs it into your Gmail and Outlook, whatever you're using. It's a great feature that HT offers. We have about 5 minutes before we are closing this webinar. If there's any questions that we haven't gotten to, please put them back in the question queue so that they come up most recently, and we'll try to get to them. I'm going to scroll through them right now and see if there are any new ones coming in. I just find it so interesting that we had nobody pick men for higher in the emotional intelligence department. And we had 10% pick neither, so you know, that could also be true a little bit. Let's see. As we wait for questions to come in, is there anything you guys want to add before we close? I know that Theresa, you're speaking in Hacking HR this week as well, so thank you for joining us. Thank you, Shay, for joining us, and thank you, Dee. And if I haven't said it yet on the official webinar, Happy International Women's Day to the three of you. Thank you for joining, and to everybody watching as well.
Yep.
Thank you so much. Yes, this is just great, and it's a privilege to be here. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Vita, and thank you everyone for tuning in. It's an exciting week. Like I said, you can, find me on LinkedIn, follow me. I talk a lot about healing and business, and of course, video marketing, which is also what I teach. So.
And I've been through Shay's program. It's awesome. She is the bomb. So yeah.
Thank you, Theresa. Yes, it's excellent. I mean, it really is fun to join a community of people all going through the same thing, because I know one of people's biggest fears is getting on camera and shooting videos. But when you have a community of people to help you, which is what you get when you join my program, it makes all the difference. I mean, it really does. And for the first time ever, Vita, this is perfect. For the first time ever, I have more women in my program this month than men.
Do you really?
Yes, because it's normally, there's a lot of men on LinkedIn. It's actually, I think, the only social media platform that's actually male dominated, not female dominated with the users, which is interesting.
Oh.
I've tended to attract a lot of male clients, but for the first time ever, it's more women. So it's super cool.
Well, that's awesome to hear. We got 2 questions, but it's pretty close to the end. So what we'll do is record answers to them and send them out with the recording of this webinar. So if you had to drop off, you're probably not watching it right now, but if you are attending and missed parts of it, you'll get recordings from this. We'll also post snippets on all of our social medias, so you can go check out Humantelligence on LinkedIn. And our YouTube channel is also Humantelligence, where this recording will be posted, as well as included in the email. And with that, I want to thank everybody for joining. And if you want to check out humantelligence.com, you can book a demo there. Follow Shay, follow Theresa, follow Dee. You can reach out and connect with them on LinkedIn and chat me there directly as well. So with that, I will close out this webinar, and thank you again for everybody joining, especially our panelists. All right, everybody, have a great, happy International Women's Day.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.